But
Hello, you guys. Welcome to another episode of Kera Dangerous Talk. We're really in business. If you look at everything that's been going on this week, it's been a crazy week in the news. So I decided to make this week my activism week, and I want to start it off with a big bang. We have a special guest live from South America, Gerald Perreira. I'm so happy to have him. Thank you for coming to the show, Gerald.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Yes, I am excited about it. You're a theologian, an educator, a columnist.
Yeah.
I mean, just you really putting in the work out here to help people. So I just kind of gave a little spiel about what you do. Well, those are your titles, but I want you to give us a little bit more detail about who you are and what your mission is with your work.
Yeah. Well, I started off at the age of, I became politically active at the age of 16. And I was drawn to the Marxist texts, you know, to reading Marx, studying Marxism and so. But at 16, it was a struggle, of course. And then when you went up the ladder in terms of age-wise, and so when you start to read, and then you read all the different Marxist texts, and you started reading the Pan-Africanists and socialist thinkers and leaders such as Kwame, Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, Frantz Fanon, and others. And I made that journey, and as much as I appreciate and can see the contribution of Marxism to the struggle of the oppressed and dispossessed people, I don't believe that Marxism and Marxism / or Leninism or what have you presents a total reality, is a totality of the truth. I think that it's a contribution, and I think it has tremendous limitations because it does not address the human being as a spiritual entity. And materialist and secular ideologies, for the want of, if I'm going to use the word secular in this sense, because it came out of the European tradition where they separate the sacred from the secular and so. But materialist ideologies that emerge out of the Enlightenment, such as Marxism and liberalism, they reduce the human person, the human being, to a one-dimensional economic being. So everything is about economics. Everything is economics is the driving force, and they negate or marginalize the spiritual dimension, the history of history, and so on. So as much as I can see the contribution, I don't think that it provides a total guide for the liberation of our non-white peoples, especially Africans. Yeah. But I've been in that journey. I was active in an organization called the Young Socialist Movement, which was I was a central executive member of President Burnham, who was a great leader at Guyana Produce Party. I was in the UTAM, the central executive, and then after President Burnham died, the party took a swing towards the right and started implementing neoliberal economic policies. Good. And that led to tremendous economic problems in our country. And I broke with that. I made a journey, went away, and then I ended up in the Libyan Jamahiriya. I worked as a journalist, and before that I worked in education. And so I worked as a teacher, and then in the education communication unit and so. And then I went to the Libyan Jamahiriya, and I worked with the Libyan revolution, And I must say that the ideology that emerged out of there, it is something more suitable. It emerged out of the motherland. And it's something that is more, it's something that we as Africans can utilize, because it goes beyond. It's not, all these Eurocentric or these ideologies that are products of Europe. And I had the opportunity of working with Kwame Ture.
Mhm.
And as I was telling the brother already, Kwame Ture was an amazing, a very dynamic, energetic, as well as a very honest person.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Are you Kwame Ture? You talking about
Formerly Stokely Carmichael, yeah.
yes, oh my God, you brought him up. I was just watching a documentary today on Amazon Prime about him and somebody I never heard of before, Michael X.
Yeah, well, Michael X was originally from Trinidad.
Yes.
His name was Michael de Freitas, and then he was in Britain. And when Malcolm X came, I think he was influenced by Malcolm X, and he changed his name to Michael X. And they have founded an organization called the Racial Adjustment Action Society, and they were involved in the Black Power movement in Britain. And then he ran into some problems. He went to Trinidad, and there was an incident, I think, where some people, they placed his residence, they found the body of a missing British socialite, Galen Benson, and a number of others were killed. And when the police in Trinidad found the bodies, he fled to Guyana because he came to address the young socialist movement at the time. And then the news broke that he was wanted, and he was, he ended up back in Trinidad, and he was later executed.
Is that the reason? So that was the reason he was hung, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Was it in Port-au-Prince?
No, this was in Port of Spain, Trinidad.
Oh, that's right. I knew it was Port of something. I knew it was Port something. Wow, that's amazing. So did you know him as well, Michael X?
No, I never met him, but I read his book, From Michael de Freitas to Michael X. I read his book. That was years ago.
Wow, God is amazing.
Unfortunate how he ended up,
Yeah, it is. Wow,
he went off the They were mixing with all sorts of people and white women, socialites, and all, He
did a lot in Europe to help the Black liberation.
He did. But he started off well-intentioned, but was sad how what happened. Yeah.
Well, you knew Carmichael, Stokely Carmichael. Tell me about the kind of man he was, just to know up close and personal. I mean, that is amazing, the history there that you were able to witness.
The thing about Kwame was, Kwame had a routine. Like, he would rise early in the morning and he would get ready, dress and everything, and he'd be sitting on his bed reading. And we had this thing, we say, we used to make a joke. We say, we'll go to Kwame's door and hit it at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we'll catch him sleeping. And we'll hit, and then we'll say, he'll say, ready for the revolution. He was always ready, but he was always reading. Whenever he was traveling, when he left Guinea and he was coming to Tripoli, or so, he always traveled with books. He was always reading, and he would share books with you. And the minute he finished a book, he would give it away. He was very free-handed.
Mm-hmm.
You tell Kwame, you look at him, you say, Kwame, I love that outfit you were wearing. And he'll say, I'll get you one. And before he will, you don't have to remind him, he will post it. You will get it in the post, And he was Kwame's lifestyle was very simple. He had no obsession, no love whatsoever for material things and the acquisition of wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And one time I could remember I saw him with all these candles, these huge these big candles. And I said, Kwame, what are you doing with all these candles? He said, this is my electricity. Because he was traveling from Tripoli to Morocco and then on to Guinea, because he was living in a rural area where there's no electricity. And he had his candles. He was buying candles. And Kwame would wear a watch. I saw him with this watch. And I said, how much that watch cost you? He said, this watch is $5 US, $4 US, $5 US. That's the type of person he was. But he was committed. Kwame was a committed revolutionary, And what was sad, and you know, he had this undying love for our people and for all oppressed peoples. But you know, sometimes when Kwame should have been in Cuba, for example, to look after his health, and so
he went to Cuba a lot of the times to relax and rest and get medical care.
Yeah, for his medical treatment for the Cubans, because the Cubans had tremendous love and respect for him, as well as he strong support the Cuban Revolution. But sometimes when he should be there for his treatment, and so Kwame will be doing political work and all of that, and that took, you know, that took its toll on him. But we keep his memory alive. I think he's one of the greatest, finest human beings I've ever came across, you know. And we continue, and we keep his memories, legacy alive, and we fight. We continue.
Well, Mr. Perreira, I did hear that he felt like he was injected with cancer, because I know he died from cancer. Did you keep in touch with him as he got older? And
well, he told us that he was convinced that that agencies of the state, of the US state, gave him cancer, because they have all of these things, you know, that they can do. In fact, there was a plan to give Nelson Mandela a jacket that was invented, and you wear it, and you can you can take it with your heart just by putting on that jacket. And they poisoned Yasser Arafat, was poisoned. You know, there were many attempts to assassinate Fidel Castro, so many hundred attempts, and to poison Castro, even to get it into his cigar and all of that. But of course, the Cuban intelligence and the Cuban security, the revolution, were very protective and very alert.
Why was Cuba such a safe haven for the Black Panthers and people fighting for Black liberation? Because I know they still say the aunt of Tupac, what is it, Assata Shakur?
Assata Shakur is there, yeah.
Yeah, she's still there. Why are we able to find refuge there in Cuba, do you think?
Well, you know, the Cuban Revolution, in its early days, the Cuban Revolution, like the revolution in Algeria, when the revolution came in Algeria, when you had Ahmed Ben Bella in Algeria, they gave assistance, they welcome African revolutionaries below, you know, from the southern part of Africa. Some of them got their early training in Algeria. Nasser did the same in Egypt, you know, and later on, Gaddafi did the same. Gaddafi opened up Libya to liberation movements from all over the world. And Cuba, in their own, with their limited resources, did that. Cubans, the Black Panthers went there. Assata Shakur had to go there because, of course, you know, the US government wanted to they trump up charges, or just like what they did to George Jackson and all the Black activists, all the Black revolutionaries. That's what they did, you know. Robert Williams went spend the time in Cuba, then he went to China and so on. But many of them, because the Cuban Revolution was supporting those struggles, and Black Panthers identify with that.
The people like Kwame, and I'm guessing the people who were close to him called him Kwame, because we know him as Stokely Carmichael. So maybe I'll call him Stokely, but I hope if I was living back then, he would have allowed me to call him Kwame. Do you think people like him who fought so hard for us, if they were alive today, do you think they would see the state of the world for Black people as we've seen improvement, or do you think they would feel like, wow, maybe we still have so much more work to be done?
I agree. They would say that we still have a lot of work to be done, because what, you know, I was listening recently to the radical theorist and educator Henry Giroux, and he was speaking about the manufacture, the age of the manufacture of ignorance. And it's different, because what has happened is, you know, we've been told, it is always said that the Marxist theory teaches that no ruling class can maintain its power, or no state can maintain its power primarily through coercion or force. They must manufacture consent. You must get the oppressed and the dispossessed classes to buy into the dominant ideology so that they would believe that the interests of the ruling class and their interests are the same. You see? Good. So you manufacture that content through the education system, through the mass media, through the church, right? And you get that. And people believe that. But today now, what is happening, because the lid has been blown and a lot of people have been waking up to things, right? So what they're doing now is you go to, you know, there is a lot of, today, the emphasis is not on critical thinking. You know, there's not discussion. People to be seen with a book. You know, I recently was taking some books, about a dozen books, out of the trunk of my car, and some youngsters passed by and they looked at me like I was an alien because nobody's carrying books. And this is part of the dumbing down process, because on social media, the social media is being used. Right? It's doing more harm because it's not, you're not getting the type of discussions that we should be involved in. I mean, it's not, you know, you're not really getting that opportunity to assess and analyze things in depth. It's just scraping, you know, it's just commenting, and so it's about likes and followings and all of that, but there's nothing of substance, you know. And this is, it is not accidental. It's not accidental because this is the age now of ignorance, where you see what they're doing is the dominant, this neoliberal ideology, right? Because when it arose, when it came into being with the Chicago School in the United States, and then with people like Milton Friedman, and they implemented the neoliberal economics, because this is the anniversary of the overthrow of Salvador Allende in Chile. That was the place where they implemented it, you know, and it was known in the United States as Reaganomics and Thatcherism in the United States. And the butcher, Pinochet, overthrew Allende, you know, and when he went to Britain, Margaret Thatcher, there was an arrest warrant for him. You know, some people organized and arrest some activists, and Thatcher allowed him to go because Thatcher saw him as an ally. But Chile was the first place where they implemented this neoliberal economics. And ever since the past 35 years, wherever that particular type of economic model has been implemented, all it has done is to increase the wealth of the wealthy. And the gap between the have and the have-nots have widened. We live in a world where millions live on, how many live on $1 a day, while the wealth of just a small percentage has increased tremendously. The wealth of, I think the wealth of 33 millionaires is equivalent to the at least 100 and something nations combined. I mean, it's appalling. And this is capitalism. That's what we're dealing with. That's what we're dealing with. And what we're witnessing here is a crisis of capitalism. And I believe that we're seeing it in its depth. I believe it's declining. I believe it's down. And I think the collapse is coming. The collapse is coming, and we have to prepare for it. We have to prepare for it because we've reached that point where the planet, where, you know, it is not sustainable. No, you cannot treat the earth, the environment and the ecosystem the way we've treated it. And the crisis, this so-called crisis of man, is essentially a crisis of Western man, you know, because what we've seen is this so-called, that period in European history that is referred to as the Enlightenment period. I like to refer to it as the so-called Enlightenment, because this Enlightenment period, this so-called Enlightenment period produced philosophers who were very racist and who argued for and justified the enslavement of captured Africans. John Locke, a philosopher of the American so-called Revolution, was a defender of all of them. he had shares, interests in the Royal African Company. You know, Hegel said that Africa is outside of history. Africa made no contribution and all of that. So when you examine Western philosophy and Western social sciences, you'll see at the core, it's racist, you know? And we have to deconstruct it. We have to deconstruct it. We have to dismantle it because no social order lasts forever. And we're seeing that capitalism, right? That's why they have to have wars, and the military industrial complex is a fundamental component of the capitalist system in the United States. So you always have to be manufacturing enemies and so. I mean, you only have to look at some of those who chair and sit on boards of the United States, big companies, corporations, and you'll see them, the Dick Cheneys, the Bakers, and so people who presided over the destruction of Iraq, Libya, the war in Afghanistan, and many other places in parts of the global south, and even in the former Yugoslavia.
You said a lot right there. I mean, from just the dumbing down of society, for one.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't know how many, when I look at the comments of some of these Black people on social media and the things that they go for, I mean, it's just, I think sometimes if this was a time of Harriet Tubman, how many people she would have to leave behind because they wouldn't know that they wouldn't know that they were slaves. I mean,
that's right. She said, I could have freed many more if they had realized. Yeah.
I don't even think she would have as many people going under the underground today because these people, I hate to say it, but the worst thing that Black people could have did is felt like they made it, because once a lot of us felt like we made it, we don't want to fight for anything. We want to just feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And some of the things that these people are liking is to the detriment of us as a whole, and they think that whatever feels good for the second is okay. They don't see nothing wrong with anything.
That's right.
And like you said, I've always heard, if you want to hide something from a N-word, you put it in a book.
Yeah.
You put it in a book.
That's, you know, yeah.
You put it in a book.
Yeah. But
look,
you know,
go ahead.
Yes, go on, sis. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, you're finished. You see, I mentioned the economic aspect of the neoliberal project, but it's more than economics. It's an attempt at a new anthropology to reconstruct the human being. So, you know, noble virtues, things like compassion and caring and sharing and cooperation and reciprocity and those things you're seen as being stupid. You're being naive, you're unrealistic. So greed is good. You know, greed becomes good. Look out for yourself. And this rugged individualism. And one of the things that they do, I think you've noticed in the United States, there's this emphasis or overemphasis on the STEM subjects, science, technology, and mathematics and so on, right? And the idea is, I think they're trying to offer people who are pursuing the STEM subjects discounts or in their to take off reduce some of their loans when they graduate. It's a part of to encourage them in STEM, but they want to downsize and marginalize the humanities and the liberal arts, right? Some campuses, even in the Caribbean, we're trying to resist the neoliberalization of the university. I don't think at one campus there's no longer a bachelor's degree in history.
And why is this?
Well, you see, when you study history, you're going to see what happened. You're going to understand what happened. When you study philosophy, you're going to ask questions. If you study theology and then you get into the radical Black theology tradition of James Cone, who wrote God of the Oppressed and Black Liberation Theology, and Nat Turner and then Mark Weiss, and you know those people, and then you start to really read the Bible as a book for liberation, right? Then they got some serious issues with that. So they don't want, and those disciplines encourage critical thinking and open up you to analysis and so they don't want that. They want to train you. They don't want educated people. They want to train you. So like a Pavlovian dog that will just
want you to do technology and make that robot.
That's right. That's right.
that will replace you.
Yes, and since I am on that, what you have is in the United States, you have the Christian right, the Christian right that hijacked the Christian message, that hijacked the Christian message and deliberately misread the scriptures, right? Either deliberately or out of ignorance. But then but what has happened is the left wing, the leftists as well as the liberals, they have left that area to the right wing. And you know, our people are a very spiritual and religious people. So if they go to church and you got people telling them about not really preaching the right message, then they're going to go down the wrong path. You know, Martin Luther King said, for example, Martin Luther King laid the foundation for liberation theology. Dr. King made a tremendous contribution. You know, he said a religion that does not address the economic and social and political issues that affect human souls is a dry as dust religion and has no place among us. Because you know, you can't compartmentalize the human being. The human being is a totality. You can't separate. God is not a being. God is not a being or entity that is for Sunday. God is the God of all life.
Yes.
You know, he's the God, the Lord of politics, of economics, and everything. So when you just want to say, well, look, politics is politics and religion is religion, or the church is the church and all that, that is something that the West, that's a Western construct. African societies never even had a word as such for religion, because religion encompassed the way everything, religion, the way you organize your village, the community, the economy, everything, your family, your human relations. So religion was like the foundation, and your politics, your governance, your system of governance, the economy and everything, those pillars rest on that foundation.
Well, let me ask you this, and I hate to even stop you because you've given us such good information, Mr. Pierre. I don't know if this is happening in South America, but I would think so. Yes. But here in America, I'm noticing that more and more Black people are turning away from God. I just look at their comments, I look at the things that they're supporting, and we've always looked at what the white man was doing and tried to emulate him, even when it was away from what we was known to do in our culture. We almost feel like, oh, if he's doing it, it must be right. Things that Black people would have never done, we are seeing them do it now. Do you feel like in South America that people are turning away from God a lot now, more than what you've seen in the past?
Yes, it's happening. Definitely, and there's a reason for that. But there's also those who are going to the churches, but the churches they're going to it's the wrong
church, the wrong leader.
Yeah, and the preaching isn't right. I'll tell you what I mean. You see,
let me get comfortable.
The thing about it is this: the Western ideology and the Western way, capitalism is the dominant global system. You see, it is one of the reasons that capitalism has been able to survive for so long. It's not because it is a superior economic system. That is not what contributed to its longevity, not really. You see what capitalism does? Capitalism appeals to the base desires, to the base levels to our animal side, if you want to use that term. Capitalism doesn't appeal to the noble side of human beings, right? An alternative democratic socialist system, socialism does. And I'm not using socialism to mean the socialism that came out to the West. I'm talking about Ishtiraki, like you had in Libya or Ujama in Africa, because African societies were communal and socialistic, and Africans practiced that long before Marx even came into existence. You know, so, and there's that spiritual component and that emphasis on spirituality. But what is happening today is to believe in God now. To say you believe in God, you're seen like as an oddball, right? And I mean, look at someone like Minister Farrakhan. What he's preaching, he's preaching a message of liberation. And yet you look at how many followers, if you check how many followers Minister Farrakhan have, and then you compare with the Kardashians, and and you'll see the world we're living in. I mean, who is the Kardashians? Who the hell are the Kardashians? What is it? What is their message? What are they doing? Have they ever made any contribution?
Just sleeping with a bunch of black men. That's it.
Exactly. But that is where it shows you, right? That's part of the dumbing down. That's part of the dumbing down. And that is where a lot of the young minds and others are going. And this battle that we are waging is not just a battle in this part of this century. It's not just a battle for the mind of our people, but a battle for the soul of our people.
It's a spiritual warfare. Let me ask you this, because this is a question I have to constantly ask myself. And I know that since we are believers of God, then we know that change and miracles can happen. But do sometimes you just sit by yourself? I mean, you were with the people who were liberating us, and do you just sit there and say, will there ever really be real change, or is it just a pursuit of change? Am I just here to keep kind of knocking off a little bit off of this? Mm-hmm. Like, how do you feel about it? Do you ever just feel like, man, I'm just sick of this. These people aren't getting it.
Yeah. Well, there's going to come a point when there's going to be, it's going to be a great awakening. It's going to happen.
You think so?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I believe, yes, it's going to come. The thing is that as a revolutionary, what separates someone like myself from others, or from the revolutionary in the Western sense, or the Marxist revolutionary, or a lot of those liberal, is this. I believe that there's a spiritual dimension to revolution. I believe that the revolution is more than political, economic, and social. There's also a spiritual side to the revolution.
I love you.
Yeah.
I love you.
And thank you. And in that spiritual aspect of the revolution, we have to overthrow. The negative side, all the negative aspects of our existence. Like envy, greed, ego. That's right, ego.
That's all a big one.
You have to bury it. In the Quran and the Islamic tradition, it speaks of the nafs. And that is what this whole thing about in the Islamic tradition, jihad is about. People think that, the Western media, the Western corporate mainstream media, they talk about these jihadists and these jihadists. No. And they said, oh, you're waging holy war. No. Jihad properly translated mean, in its translation, any struggle to achieve good is jihad, right? Anything you exhort, if you try to do community work to help to feed the hungry in your community, that's jihad. Because jihad is not about war. The Arabic word for war is qital. That's the Arabic word for war. It's not jihad, right? In fact, holy war is a European concoction. Is the European started with that. That came out St. Thomas Aquinas. That is a Catholic thing, right? The holy war in the Crusader tradition. So in this jihad, there are two dimensions. There is the greater jihad and the lesser jihad. The greater jihad, you can't see the enemy is not one that you see with your eyes. The enemy is within you. And that's the hardest battle or struggle to wage, right? The lesser jihad is the jihad that you see the enemy in front of you, So we can overthrow one ruling class. We can overthrow a dictatorship or remove a government. And then when we take power, we can carry on and reproduce the same nonsense like those before, right? And that is not what we want, because a revolution should mean a qualitative, not just quantitative, a qualitative change.
Well, how long into this awakening do you think? Because I know in the Bible it talks about this period of peace, but after that, it's going to come hell. So is that similar to that period that you think this awakening?
Well, I believe that God interferes. The God I believe in is not the God of the Greeks and the Romans, or a God who competes with man for power. Is jealous of man. That's the Greek tradition. The gods are jealous of some men and all of that. My God is a God that interferes in the affairs of men. I mean, he sent Moses down to Pharaoh to let my people go. That was a concrete political act.
Yes.
But
yes.
so people, when Jesus said to render the things that are Caesar unto Caesar, and that the things that are God unto God, that some backward say, well, this is separation of church and state, and the thing. No. What Jesus was actually saying was, look, give Caesar what is his own, because it's fleeting, it's temporary, it's not lasting. The things of God will endure and last forever.
Yes.
And you need to see beyond Caesar. To Caesar. It wasn't a separation because that Jesus brought a message of liberation. And this is where I honor the tradition of a very great man, may God be pleased with him and his soul, is the late Dr. James Cone, who was a professor at Union Theological College, and he wrote Black Power and Liberation Theology, God of the Oppressed and Black Liberation Theology. And, he challenged, he said theology's greatest sin was ignoring white supremacy. And when you listen to the likes of these white evangelical preachers, right? That fly around in jets and all of that. These guys are preaching false doctrines. And they got some of them who look like me. You are not going to call their name.
Oh my God. You are preaching. I keep telling people.
Yeah, they are preaching false doctrine. They are Black preachers preaching this so-called prosperity theology. Because what they do is this. They don't see, as Dr. King said, sin is not just a personal thing. Sin is also structural and systemic. Right? Good. So you cannot say condemn a person for sinning, for example, stealing a loaf of bread, but then you don't condemn the system that drives that person to steal a loaf of bread.
Yes.
And Dr. King addressed that, and that is Cone. So this is the liberation message. So if you can't get a job, you don't say to the person who can't get a job, well, you need to do some more, you need to get some more tithes and all of that, and you get, no. You can't get a job because the system, unemployment is rising. You can't find a job. These are things, it just don't. This is what these so-called prosperity theology preachers do. And those who fly the American flag in the church, or some of those who will have whether the flag in the mosque. I mean, how could you put that flag, in a church when you know what a flag represents? And this is why I salute people like the pastor Reverend Jeremiah Wright, when he said, all that America did, the genocide against indigenous people, how it treated African Americans, what it did throughout the world, the overthrow of Kwame Nkrumah, right? You kill leaders all over, you overthrow governments, and what you did. And then you turn and say, God bless America. He said, no, God, no, God damn America, And this is what we have to look at, because at the end of the day, the very foundation, the people who, the so-called founding fathers, I mean, this, they were all slaveholders. And when they spoke of men, they meant white men, not the indigenous people and Africans, And at the foundation of that, you had all sorts of things, but the Calvinist tradition is running there. The Calvinist tradition, that Calvinist Protestant tradition is there at the foundation of that white supremacy in America. And we have to wage that battle. The secular left cannot do it because the secular left are quite atheistic. You know, we have in the tradition of Michael Lorner mentioned that there's this book, The Left Hand of God, and Jim Wallace book, The Soul of Politics, and so, you know, because we need to, you know, in the African tradition, politics was spiritual. It was everything, or economics and everything was spiritual. But when you look at the economics that emerged out of the European tradition, it's something that is basically, it's all about the material and about the competition or the war, the struggle for resources, right? And who can control those resources? And that's the problem we have with the capitalist system. We have, when you look at a country like Africa, you name it, whether it's coffee, cocoa, gas, oil, any resource, Africa, it's there in Africa. But then you look at the African continent and you see where it is. You know, the multinational corporations plunder Africa, and they do that in tandem. They do it in collaboration with neo-colonial African elites. And when you get revolutionary African leaders, conscious African leaders who decide that they're going to shift this thing, you overthrow them. You did it to Kwame Nkrumah. You put pressure on Secretary. You murdered, you killed Murtala Muhammad in Nigeria. You did the same to Thomas Sankara. And the last one, you did it, Laurent Gbagbo. Laurent Gbagbo was moving. He decided with Libya they were going to move. He was going to take control of the cocoa. The French, in collaboration, they got rid of him. And then they invaded Libya and they overthrew the Libyan Jamahiriya.
Yeah, the French have not been friends of Africans, right? That's for sure.
And then they tell you this big lie that Gaddafi was killing his people. And it was such, I mean,
I heard he didn't want to be a part of the World Bank. That's what I heard.
Exactly. Well, you know, one of the things, and when you come to Haiti, we'll deal with that. Because the thing about the European is not a forgiving, the white man is not a forgiving person. He does not forgive and he does not forget.
But the Negroes love to forgive.
We forgive, and we also tend to forget a lot.
Yes, we forget a lot, and then they jump on the black people who are like us, who don't forget.
Exactly.
You know.
Exactly. So in 1969, when Gaddafi came to power, the Al-Fata revolution, the first thing they did, apart from taking over the oil, was to kick the foreign bases, the British and American bases out. He was never forgiven for that. Then when you had the so-called, when you had the oil crisis, or they say the price of oil went up, oil and gas during the 70s with OPEC, when Libya put pressure to get better prices for the oil, right? And it drove oil prices up. He was never forgiven for that. So these people, whether they come, whether it's Tony Blair or who, they can come, they can talk with you, they can smile, they can take, but they never forget. And they're always waiting for the moment to get at you. They tried it with Lockerbie, right? And they damn well knew, that Lockerbie, Libya had nothing to do with Lockerbie. They know their intelligence services, they know who's responsible for Lockerbie, they know it. But Libya was the whipping port boy at the time. So you went in and you whipped Libya, okay? Then Gaddafi was sitting on 150 something tons of gold.
Ooh.
And 165 to 175 tons of silver. So,
wow.
Yeah, I was at a conference when he raised this whole thing in front of African leaders, because they wanted to create this gold dinar. It came up, people in RT dealt with it. This gold dinar that would trade with African currency, you'll buy it. We measure the gold dinar. And they were going to develop this African Development Bank and have it in Abuja, Nigeria. There was going to be a bank that would have been based when he met with Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. They were going to set up a bank, a branch of the bank in Margarita, so that Africans in the diaspora and organizations can access loans and so. Good. Then like Africa used to pay France how much million francs per year for the satellite. And then Libya signed the thing with China, and they built the satellite that got rid of all of that. So you didn't have that money going to France. That was, France didn't like that. So if you could have been on a cell phone in a market in Tripoli, and you could call someone in Pretoria or Johannesburg, South Africa, and it sounded like you were talking to them around the corner, all of that, you know? So all of this, and then when they started with dinar, to talk about the gold dinar, the French sent a delegation saying, you can't do this. France was upset. France threatened. So when the thing started in Libya, right, it was just a little, people were protesting. And at the time, even Gaddafi said, let them protest, they have a right to protest. But what happened in Libya and what took place in Egypt and Tunisia were different. There were popular uprisings in Tunisia and Egypt. And I think in less than 2 weeks, in 14 days, the president of Tunisia, he fled. And I think Mubarak lasted 21 days. He collapsed. There was no popular uprising in Libya. Gaddafi, the Libyan forces, the Libyan revolution, and loyalist forces, and the people fought for almost 10 months. 10 months. Now, you can't stand up to NATO with all that bombing and cruise missiles for 10 months unless there was some level of mass support. And today, there are millions of Libyans who are residing outside the country, you know? And what people don't tell you is that Libya is an occupied country. Libya is occupied. Libya is occupied, but they destroyed that country. Because, you know, it's like your house is located between two houses, and there's fire on both sides, and someone doesn't like it, so you fan the flame. So they could engulf the house in the middle. And you see where Libya is located, and you look at Egypt next, and Syria. So it was the opportunity. So the moment this protest started, the CIA was in there, British forces were there, Al-Qaeda operatives were airlifted there, you know, Qatar had special forces there. Sudan, that was identified, the Omar Bashir regime that was supposed to be a terrorist regime, right? Provided their support, send fighters to help the so-called rebels. And then the US started easing, when Trump came in, they started easing the sanctions off of Omar Bashir in Sudan, because they helped in the removal of the regime in Libya. So, you know, we're dealing with people who are, as Kwame Ture said, imperialism and white supremacy doesn't lie sometimes. They lie all the time. You know?
Of course.
I said that. They lie and they lie, you know? And that's
while we over there in that part of the world, while we still got time here, I want to hit you with, since we brought up a little bit about terrorism in there, and you brought up Trump. I know if we go back to when Trump was in office here in the US, Trump he said that Qatar, had been a founder of terrorism at a very high level. Yeah. Now, just to give people some, just to give you an idea of where Qatar is, it's above Saudi Arabia, okay? And I know that Trump's administration disagreed with him at the time. The captain for the Pentagon, the spokesperson, Jeff Davis, back in 2016, I believe, he said that blocking Qatar from having the routes at sea was hindering the ability to plan for longer-term military operations. Even the United States Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, said he called for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, the UAE, and Egypt to ease the blockade towards Qatar. There are humanitarian consequences to this blockade. Now, I just want to explain to people that Qatar was known around the world for funding terrorism, although they said they did not, okay? Yeah. So when Trump first started talking about it, he was in cahoots. He felt like, okay, yeah, let's block them. He was okay with what Saudi Arabia and Bahrain was doing. I believe Bahrain was the first place to block them, okay? But later on, Trump met with the monarch of Qatar, and they claimed that they weren't gonna fund terrorism anymore. They had nothing to do with it. So I'm a little confused as to how did that happen so fast, and what's really going on with Qatar, because we know that they're allied of the U.S. We have a military base there. We get a lot of weapons from them. There's a lot of trading going on. Hundreds of thousands of students come to America to come to our universities. We have branch universities in Qatar. What is really going on, Mr. Pierre?
I'm glad you raised this, and it's a very good question. And the way you touched on it and explained what this is and raised the question. Let me tell you something. The hypocrisy, it's unbelievable. It's just sometimes when you listen to these people, right? Trump and all of them, the United States, you cringe. You actually, it's nauseating. Now, take, for example, we'll get to Qatar. Look at Cuba. They're actually, the Trump administration put Cuba on the list as a country that sponsors terrorism. Cuba, you cannot find one case, one example of where Cuba funded terrorism. Cuba supported liberation movements. Cuba's never supported any act of terrorism. In fact, Cuba has been the victim of terrorist acts initiated by the CIA, involving the CIA and US state agencies, right? The bombing on October the 6th, in Guyana and Cuba, as well as the DPRK, North Korea, they will commemorate the loss, their citizens that lost their lives in the Air Cubana bombing in October the 6th, 1976, right? That plane, we'll get to the thing about Qatar, that plane left Guyana with Cuban teachers on board. There was a Cuban fencing team. It had some Korean diplomats. The plane went to Trinidad, where the bomb was placed on board the flight. Prime Minister Ralph Gonzalez, in a talk, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent, the Grenadines, gave a talk at the university and detailed about this thing, which we know of. The guys who planted this were Cuban immigrants, what they call gusanos or worms, counter-revolutionaries. They planted a bomb on board the Cubana flight, which landed in Trinidad. And then the plane touched down, the plane went to Barbados. The men who planted the bomb got off in Barbados, went to a hotel, and the first call they made on their arrival in the hotel was to the US Embassy. When they returned from the meeting at the US Embassy, they went to a meeting at the US Embassy, they returned to their hotel room, uplifted their luggage, and then shifted to another hotel. Okay, then they got out. The flight took off and it exploded over Barbados, right? Killing all aboard. And that the man who financed that resided for years in the United States. And the countries were demanding his extradition, and he was never extradited. Freddie Lugo, one who was involved in it, was imprisoned in Venezuela and got away from a maximum security prison, of course, with the help of the CIA, right? And they speak of terrorism, and you're putting Cuba on a list of countries that sponsor terrorism, and Cuba has never sponsored one act of terrorism. Cuba supported liberation movement to overthrow the apartheid regime in South Africa, and they helped the frontline states in Namibia and Angola and Mozambique. Now, getting back, because we're talking about the hypocrisy. You see, what happened is the Muslim Brotherhood is an organization that's been around for many years in Egypt. It was founded by Hassan al-Banna. And they had leaders like Said Qutb and so, who wrote a number of books and so, but they actually shaped to a certain extent the fundamentalist Islam that you see. And what happened was the Brotherhood later on, there were groups within the Brotherhood, some tendencies split because they didn't approve go along with the Brotherhood reformist ways or their methods of achieving power. And you had offshoots like the group that assassinated President Anwar Sadat, right? And some of them went on to link up with Al-Qaeda and so. Good. When the Soviets were in Afghanistan, the Afghan Mujahideen, freedom fighters, there were different groups who got together to fight the Soviet Union. And that is where Osama bin Laden came in, because the Saudis were backing the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. And Ronald Reagan invited leaders of the Mujahideen to the White House, and he called them freedom fighters. So they were supporting these guys against the Soviets. And then when the Soviets pulled out, they started fighting for power. But they weren't paying attention to the Taliban because they didn't know. And the Taliban swept out from the mountains, came, and the Taliban took on all of them, drove them, defeated them, and captured power, right? But they played a role in these groups. So what happened? Saudi Arabia too played a key role. But what happened is Qatar became like an upstart. So Qatar came from behind and started challenging Saudi Arabia for control and influence of these radical groups. Because I don't know, you see that for years, the Taliban political bureau is based in Doha, in Qatar.
Yes.
Right? But America,
let me give people some history about this. The U.S. established diplomatic relations with Qatar in 1972, following its independence from the United Kingdom in 1971. Yeah. The United States and Qatar also cooperate on security in the Persian Gulf region. Qatar supports the Northern Atlantic Treaty Organization, otherwise known as NATO, collective security against the Soviet Union. Qatar is a major staging ground for air operations against the Islamic State, Iraq, and Syria. Yeah. Now, what I find funny is when you're dealing with corruption, oil is never far away. The United States is a leading equipment supplier and partner for Qatar's oil and gas industry, and U.S. companies have played a significant role in the development of oil and gas sector. The U.S. imports from Qatar includes liquefied natural gas, aluminum, fertilizers, and sulfur. So they kind of give you an idea of the relationship they have together. And they just have a trading relationship with Qatar with over 120 U.S. companies operating in the country. Yeah. And also what I find interesting is, Qatar really didn't have much there, especially the capital, but now the citizens of Qatar are some of the richest in the world.
Yes.
And yes, I bet this has something to do with the relationship with America. I could just bet your bottom dollar with that.
Yes, because it's all about the oil and gas, and this war on terror is a hoax, this war on terror, because the thing about it is, when for years, one of the groups, Hamas, in the Palestinian territory, Hamas had an office for years. Hamas was in Syria, in Damascus. And when the uprising started against the Assad regime, against the Assad regime, Qatar said to the Hamas political bureau, it's one way or the other. You either leave Syria, or else we'll cut your funding. And they pulled out of Syria. Pulled out. But what happened is that Qatar started to upstage Saudi Arabia for influence. And the war started between Saudi Arabia and Qatar because Saudi Arabia was losing their influence, right? And Saudi Arabia turned around and accused Qatar of financing terrorism. And they told Trump that Qatar is financing terrorism. And Trump said, because they were sending weapons to America, had a big bill, they were going to sell so much billions of dollars in weapons to Qatar. And Trump said, Qatar, are you, it's like this, Qatar, are you actually practicing terrorism? And Qatar said, are you exporting? And Qatar said, no. And next thing you know, everything went through, and that was it.
Do you think Trump was under pressure to mend relationships with Qatar? Because I feel like he was not with them at first, and then all of a sudden his administration was also against it, and then he had to change his mind and say they are not funding terrorism. Do you think it was some pressure behind the scenes on Trump?
Of course it's all about it's business.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened is this. What we need to look at is this: they use the imperialists, the Americans, the British, and the French are using these groups, these so-called jihadist groups, these Islamist groups, to overthrow revolutionary nationalist regimes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Isn't it interesting that you have a repressive regime in Saudi Arabia, and there was no uprising because they deal with dissent formally, right? There was an uprising, the Shia majority in Bahrain, and it was put down with the help of the British, because Britain sends a lot of weapons to Bahrain, and the Sunni minority holds power there. So they play the Sunni Shia difference, you know, the Shia Islam and Sunni. They play the two groups against each other. Good. This is what they do. It's part of the whole thing. But what is interesting to note is, take the Islamic State, ISIL in the Levant, or what they call ISIS.
Mm-hmm.
You check this out. Do the research.
Mm-hmm.
Since ISIS came into existence, it's a breakaway from Al Qaeda. Since ISIS came into existence, ISIS has never ever touched a Zionist target. ISIS has not killed one Jew. You check it out. ISIS killed most of the victims of ISIS terror has been Muslims. 90% of the people killed by ISIS are Muslims. Then you will get Yazidis and Christians.
Yes, sir.
Right.
We will leave it there, and let me just put this out there for everybody about Qatar. So Qatar announced, and I don't have the date for this, I'm sorry, but at some point they announced a plan to invest $45 billion in the U.S. in addition to billions of dollars worth of military and aviation, energy, and ICT contracts. And another thing to note, Qatar and the U.S. belong to a number of the same international organizations, including the UN, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and World Trade Organizations.
Yes.
And they also signed, the U.S. and Qatar signed the Trade Investment Framework Agreement and participate in annual bilateral strategic dialogues. So I want to thank you so much for coming on today, because Mr. Gerald Perreira, because you just confirmed a lot of things for me, spiritually, and just a beautiful conversation. The fact that you could even give me stories about Kwame. I mean, I was just reading about him and watching him on TV. That's just a confirmation from God to me. So, I mean, I want to thank you. I mean, I feel so honored to have spoken with you today, even to bring up the topic of Qatar and just allow me to learn new things. And it's so much evil in the world, and it's so many people that we really got to keep our eyes open, because it's a physical warfare, it's a spiritual warfare. And it's good to know that even though you're in South America, you get it. It's people, I keep telling people, it's people, it may not seem like there's a lot of us, but it's some of us, and we spread it out, and it's some common people with common sense. It's some people that can think logically. We out here. I mean, it's hard to see us through all the dummies out here, but we out here, baby. So you give me a little bit more hope speaking to you, Mr. Gerald Perreira. I hope you will come on again, because I want to ask you more questions about Guyana. I know you guys are dealing with a lot there. There's a lot of poverty going on. I want to ask you about your politics system, because I know it's based on ethnicity. I would like to dwell more into that. But I just feel so honored. Any final thoughts from you, just to summate some of the things we talked about today?
I just want to say this to finish quickly on Qatar, and then my final thoughts quickly. You know, you've seen recently the spread of these Islamist groups in Africa, in the Sahel, in Mali, in even down in Mozambique, in Nigeria, across the Burkina Faso, right down. They're even going down as far as Angola, that area in Mozambique. And you look at the weaponry and the motor vehicles and the motorcycles they're using. Where is the money from this coming? I am of the firm opinion, and I'm going to be a number of us, we're going to be proven right. Because if you look, Qatar and Turkey are competing strongly in Africa, right? Turkey just opened up a base in Somalia. Up in Somalia, I think they're trying to set up their base there. They're taking Somalis and sending them to Turkey to study and all of that. And there's war because Turkey too is competing, right? So there's a battle to control these groups. It's Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. And I believe that one of the reasons Qatar, they just pat Qatar in the wrist was because the role Qatar played in overthrowing the Libyan regime, as well as the funding that Qatar had supports groups to overthrow Assad regime in Syria, right? And I believe that Qatar is behind a lot of these groups that are creating mischief and disturbance, and Qatar must be exposed. Qatar is a supporter of terrorism, but nobody says it, right? Qatar is not on the list, but they put Cuba on the list that has never supported one act of terrorism. My final thought is that, well, you know, the struggle we have to fight. As Kwame Ture said, you know, we don't give up, we go down fighting. And it is our duty as revolutionaries we have to be in organization. We have to get people to join organization. We have to get them to study. We have to, but it will come through struggles, not only about reading books, but you have to go out. And as Fanal said, get your hands dirty in the trenches and the terrifying of your mind. We have to go out and struggle, right? And we can't give up, because if we give up, if we surrender, then all that the ancestors have fought for, all that those who have made that contribution, right? We're supposed to stand on their shoulder. And someone said history is like a relay race. The baton is passed on, and we have to finish that race.
Give me liberation or give me death.
Total, yes.
Yes.
Right on.
Yes. And just to give people some more research to do, when you stop watching this show, I want y'all to Google Qatar. And it's like, you would think it's this big place, but it's not. I mean, it's ridiculous. So this small place, country
fighting out it's
yes. I mean, when a big dog got your back, you can be a small little puppy, because Saudi Arabia is massive compared to Qatar. Even Bahrain is way bigger than Qatar, and they got all this stuff going on. Mr. Gerald Perreira, I mean, I didn't even get into the Chinese and the Indians with you, because they kicking the Africans' butts and they taking over everywhere. But we will join each other again. I have to say thank you so much for enlightening us with this information, and God bless you. We're in touch now, brother. We're in touch now.
In touch, yes. And thank you, sister. Same to you. God bless you. Stay safe and strong.
You as well. And I want to tell all the viewers out there, I forgot to say at the beginning of the show, but those who join us from social media, make sure you subscribe to the Kera Dangerous Talk YouTube channel. Also like and comment. That helps the algorithm, because like this brother said, there's a lot of silly stuff on the internet, but when we give you shows like this, they try to block it. So the more you guys go and support it, go like it, go subscribe, that helps to get information like this out to the people. So continue to support us, continue to support Mr. Perreira by reading his columns that he writes, and books or anything that he's done. Just put his name in Google and you'll find out all his information. Anywhere these people can find you, Mr. Perreira, that they can check out any of your stuff specifically?
Yes, you can read Black Agenda Report, Black Agenda Report, San Francisco Bay View, Modern Ghana. You just Google the name Gerald A. Perreira and all the articles and lists could come up. Libya 360 or Internationalist 360, Countercurrents, it's all over.
Yes. And this is a man that Farrakhan invited to the Jamaican Million Man March. So this is the real deal right here. Again, brother, thank you so much. God bless. Continue your work.
Keep up. You're doing a good work. You keep going. Don't let anyone deter you from what you're doing. Keep the good fight going.
Oh, thank you. We're gonna be in touch because I need people like you around me. So we'll be seeing you, and I'll be talking to you very soon. I appreciate you.
All the best, sister. Stay strong.
All right. Good night, everybody.